I'm on to you.
All right. I think we're going to have time probably for one more question, depending on how it goes. And it's from Brian Hallenbeck, and it's to Mr. Needleman.
Mr. Needleman, there's a consensus that the opioid epidemic that's ravaging so many towns and areas around here and then throughout the Northeast and elsewhere, that requires more resources to fight it. I want to ask, do you have a plan for improving and expanding services, including prevention programs, and how would you go about paying for such programs?
So this is a problem that I live with as first selectman every day. My cell phone gets all the 911 calls from my town, and I see an unconscious, unresponsive call, and I know that there's a pretty high likelihood that it's an overdose. And we've had 4 or 5. We've had the same person overdose in consecutive days on the narcotics that are around. So, of course, I believe we have to fund prevention, and we need to continue supplying Narcan to our first responders, which have saved countless lives already. I was on the board of the Rushwood Center, which is a behavioral health and addiction services hospital, for 8 years, and it's a cause near and dear to my heart. So seeing this upsurge is absolutely terrible, and the deaths relating from the importation of fentanyl and the ingredients to make fentanyl, which are spiking heroin and killing people left and right, I think that this is an area where we need to find money to help fight it at a municipal and a state level.
Thank you. Senator Linares.
Heroin addiction is a huge issue in Connecticut right now. L&M Hospital had 5 overdoses in 5 hours just several weeks ago. It's one of the reasons why the Connecticut Republicans proposed legislation to stop the Citizens Election Program and fully fund mental health services so that we can help rehabilitate folks that are addicted to heroin. When someone gets addicted to heroin, the receptors in their brain that create positive feelings, euphoria, positive feelings, they can't produce them naturally again for over a year. It's a very addictive substance, and it's better to invest in rehabilitating folks that are addicted than just sending them to jail. Where we do need to be more strict is in terms of how we deal with drug dealers. There is a bill that folks are considering proposing, which ultimately, if someone deals heroin to an individual that then goes and overdoses on the drug, the dealer can be thrown in jail for manslaughter. That is a policy that some folks on my side of the aisle are considering proposing in the next legislative session.
We have another 30 seconds on this opioid issue. Mr. Needleman.
So I lived through the 1970s and 80s with the 3 strikes and you're out, unintended consequences of bad legislation. So I'd be reluctant on the last piece of what Senator Linares said. And I also don't believe that setting up the Citizens Election Program as a straw man for funding mental health, which costs billions of dollars or hundreds of millions for sure, is the answer. But we do need to find more money at a state and municipal level, and here the municipalities need to participate. We are bearing the burden of paying for Narcan in all of our ambulances, and it's necessary.
Thank you. I'm going to squeeze one more question. It's sort of a follow-up. It'll begin with Senator Linares to our time cues. Why don't we both give him 1 minute, and then I'll move to closing statements on this one. There's been some proposals in other states that drug companies pay into a fund to help addiction services, much like Casino Ventures now have to pay in to support gambling addiction services. And I was wondering what our candidates might think about making that requirement of the pharmaceutical companies, since the problem is often traced to the prevalence of painkillers. And why don't we start with Senator Linares to have a minute, and then we'll hear from Senator Needleman.
I would be
Excuse
open.
me, Mr. Needleman.
I would be open to bringing in the pharmaceutical businesses to talk with them about that, and I think that we can do that only if we would lockbox the funds that go to that program. Like I said before, so often we see money going into the Special Transportation Fund and used for the general fund, tourism, general fund. If those funds would go to pay for rehabilitation and mental health services, I would be open to discussing that.
Thank you. Mr. Needleman?
A new tax. So I am in the pharmaceutical business. I do not make controlled substances, for the record. And I'm not sure how you would actually do that. That there are companies that make a wide array of products. There's a few that, the people who invented OxyContin, a lot of blame is being laid at their feet for marketing the drug so aggressively. And I think that the marketing of drugs themselves is really the core problem. But not everybody who overdoses from heroin started with painkillers. Some did, some didn't. So I don't know that another tax is the answer. I know that the pharmaceutical companies do need to be part of the solution, and I would welcome them being part of the conversation.
All right, thank you. Now we're going to our closing statements. Each candidate will have a minute to sum up, and by a flip of the coin, we're going to start with Senator Linares.